Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Richard Coruscant. I'm chair of the Bay Area Climate Change Council, or as we fondly refer to it as BACC. On behalf of BACC, welcome to the 2024 Bay Area Climate Forum. It's inspiring to see so many leaders and residents in the Hamilton and Burlington Bay Area come out tonight to the Royal Botanical Gardens in support of climate action. In addition to those of you in the room, we also have guests on our live stream. Welcome to all. For those of you here in person, if you'd like to get up during the event to grab a drink, please feel free to do so. There's water to my right, and there is coffee and tea available at the bar. If you're going outside, please make sure you come back. I know it's beautiful out there, but we'd like you to be here. Now, before we get too far down the road, one of the things I like to do is offer a land acknowledgement at each BACC meeting. We always do this, and we believe it's something very important in our work. So we recognize that our work and the work of our member organizations takes place on the traditional Indigenous territories of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, Six Nations of the Grand River, and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. This territory is part of the Dish with One Spoon Treaty, an agreement between the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee and allied nations to peaceably share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. We wish to express gratitude to Mother Earth and for the resources we are using and honor all First Nation, Métis, and Inuit people who have been living on the land since time immemorial. Now, BACC's journey towards reconciliation has been started, but we're still a long way to go. But our staff and our members participate in Indigenous-led cultural capacity training and are working to create long-term relationships with local Indigenous partners based on reciprocity. BACC also developed an Indigenous collaboration policy to ensure that its policy development process considers the perspectives of Indigenous partners and ensures data sovereignty. These are just a few steps as we work towards unraveling historical and current inequity and injustice and build reciprocal relationships and amplify Indigenous voices and Indigenous-led climate action. BACC still has work to do. We are in the process of completing governance review and reopening our implementation teams, which you'll hear more about later on this evening. As we complete this work, we commit to building relationships based on mutual respect, understanding, and collaboration, and ensuring that our actions contribute to the healing and reconciliation. Now, BACC is a collective of 13 individuals and organizations across the Hamilton-Burlington Bay Area who are committed to moving the needle on climate. I would like to ask our BACC members who are present to please stand and give a wave to everyone in the audience. You will notice that, go ahead folks, these are the people who are doing all the hard work. And this is all volunteer, by the way, so they really dedicate an awful lot of their time. You will notice these individuals have name tags which indicate that they are in fact a BACC member. So please feel free to find them after the event if you want any specific questions about our work. And to our BACC members, we recognize and appreciate the time and energy that you contribute to advancing climate action in the Hamilton-Burlington Bay Area. Thank you for what you do. It's really much appreciated. Now, BACC is generously supported by the cities of Burlington and the city of Hamilton and Mohawk College. We are grateful for your continued support, without which we could not have the impact that we do. Of course, tonight's event wouldn't be possible without our sponsors, and we'd like to thank them. To our presenting sponsor, Alena, as the region's largest private landholder and developer, Alena is focused on accelerating the creation of critical community infrastructure and programming aimed at promoting our region's well-being. Your support has helped to make this evening possible, and we're looking forward to hearing from you later this evening. We'd also like to thank our major sponsor, the Hamilton Industrial Environmental Association, also known as HIEA. HIEA is comprised of 13 member organizations and is a member-run, not-for-profit organization serving local Hamilton steel, industrial, agricultural processing, and shipping, manufacturing, chemical, and recycling companies. HIEA's members represent the historical, present, and future industrial core of Hamilton and surrounding communities. Members are committed to the local community to improving company environmental performance. HIA's board of directors is composed of senior operating officers from each company. And we are pleased to welcome HIA's chair, Julie Wenzinga, manager corporate environment for Stelco Hamilton. HIA's mission is to care for the environment and improve the quality of life in our communities through sustainable operations, open dialogue with neighbors, and local partnerships that support environmental education for Hamilton students. HIA is an active member in discussions and actions through local community initiatives impacting the environment and climate change. HIA and its members firmly believe that students of today are the architects of tomorrow's world, offering environmental bursaries at Mohawk College and McMaster University, and an endowed scholarship at McMaster University. HIA proudly sponsors multiple organizations in the Bay Area, including BACC. So Julie, thank you for supporting this event tonight. And thank you to our forum supporters. We are also pleased to have representatives from each of these organizations with us tonight. They are Friendlier, Hamilton Community Enterprises, Landwise, and the Realtors Association of Hamilton and Burlington. We're thrilled to be joined tonight by Mayor Meed Ward and Mayor Horwath. We also have a number of city councilors in the audience today. I'd like to welcome councilors Kevin Galbraith, Lisa Cairns, Rory Nissan from Burlington, and from Hamilton, Maureen Wilson, Narinder Nan, Tammy Dwang, Mark Tadson, Greg Kassar, and Alex Wilson. Thank you for attending this forum this evening. And a warm welcome to Michelle Tom, Constituency Assistant for MPP Sandy Shaw, representing Hamilton West, Ancaster, and Dundas Electoral District. Now, we have an eventful evening ahead of us. We'll begin with a fireside chat with Mayor Meed Ward and Mayor Horwath, followed by remarks from BACC's manager, Jesse Elders, on BACC's work and its new strategic plan. We will then welcome our keynote speaker, Jennifer Keesmaat, to the stage. I think Jennifer's on her way, so cross our fingers. For our audience, you may ask questions of any of our speakers tonight by scanning the QR code on the screen. With the QR code, you can navigate to Mentimeter website and enter the access code on the screen, which is 1951-7431. Again, that's 1951-7431, and this allows us to then take your questions for later on. For those of you attending via live stream, you can also submit your questions using the same access code. Submit your questions in writing. We'll do our best to answer as many as we can. Unfortunately, because of our time constraints, we may not get to them all. Now, momentarily, I will introduce the mayors of Hamilton and Burlington to speak about BACC and climate action within our communities. But for those of you who don't know BACC's story, it began with the cities of Burlington and Hamilton in 2017 at the first Bay Area Economic Summit, where the cities came together along with Mohawk College and committed to working together on a regional approach to climate action. These three partners recognized a shared commitment to combating climate change and that this work would be done more efficiently together than apart. The question was what working together would look like in practice. The answer came in large part through extensive community consultation and engagement in 2018. Nearly 900 individuals in the Hamilton-Burlington Bay Area participated in a consultative process that led to the formation of BACC's governance structure as it exists today. The Bay Area community's voice spoke loudly and clearly. Coordinated effort and community-based solutions are essential in our response to the climate crisis. If we are to tackle something as significant as climate change, we need to ensure that we are all rowing in the same direction. And so BACC was formed as a collective impact initiative of individuals, organizations working together across traditional boundaries to move the needle on climate change. Tonight, we are pleased to welcome Mayor Meed Ward from the City of Burlington and Mayor Horwath from the City of Hamilton to speak about their city's ongoing commitment to climate action across the Bay Area. Mayor Meed Ward and Mayor Horwath, it's now my privilege to welcome both of you to the stage. So we're going to have a little bit of a fireside chat. And first, let me welcome both Mayor Meed Ward and Mayor Horwath to the stage, and appreciate both of you being here. As leaders in our community, it's so important we hear from you, your thoughts around climate change and climate action that needs to be taken. So to start the process off, we have a few questions that we've kind of prepared that we'd like to pose to both of you. And then we'll also see what comes back in terms of questions from the audience on Mentimeter. So let's get started. Individuals have their own reasons to be concerned about how climate change will affect their personal lives. As a mayor, why do you think it's critical that we address climate change in our cities? And you might talk a little bit about the effects you've seen already and what are the threats going forward. So Mayor Meed Ward, why don't we start with you, and then we'll let Mayor Horwath go next.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to share a few words about what the city of Burlington is doing. Thanks to all of you for coming. That means you're climate champions and warriors already. So thank you for that. We need to clone you and make sure more people feel that way. And, you know, it's really, there's a lot of ways to answer this question, but I'm going to answer it from a monetary perspective. Because if we don't address climate change, our costs go up. For the city, they go up for the taxpayers, and that means we can't fund the other things that we truly care about, the critical needs of our community, housing, mental health, addictions, those issues that we should be focused on. And I'll just give you a couple of numbers of what we've experienced because of the impacts of climate change, and we call it warmer, wilder, wetter weather. And we've all experienced it, but just a few of the things that have happened in our city. So on August 4th, we had 2014, we had the flood. We got 191 millimeters of rain in about 8 hours. That, just for an order of magnitude, that's normally what we get in 2 months. And we had flooding through our creeks. We had flooding over surface areas. Parts of the 407 and QEW in Burlington were, you couldn't pass. 3,000 homes reported flooding. And this resulted in, wait for it, $90 million of insured claims. 90 million. Some of those folks now cannot get insurance. That is the impact. It has been reported that for every $1 of insured losses, there are $3 to $4 of uninsured losses. So multiply that $90 million figure by 3 to 4. That's what it costs people to not pay attention to climate change. We have high winds and freezing events. We had the ice storm. We all experienced the ice storm. We have impacts to our urban forest and our hydro lines getting hit by trees and outages. We experienced that as a province, and actually that hit both borders, US and Canada. In 2022, 35.7% of Burlington Hydro customers lost power, with 90% of power being restored in 9 hours, which is great. But you think of our world now, post-COVID, how much of what we do, how our work, our learning, our connection with people is based on having reliable power. That disconnects people from each other. Rain events. So we've had delays to opening our golf course because of rain events, which may seem like a small thing, but that's recreation for people, and recreation is health. It's mental health. It's getting kids out to play a sport. It's revenue for the city. So back to that economic piece. We also have air quality issues, of course, which we all experience so significantly from forest fires that were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles away. And we could not go outside. People couldn't breathe. So there's also things like the freeze-thaw events that affect our infrastructure. So when you have a freeze and a thaw and weather that is unpredictable, you get a lot more potholes in your asphalt. Again, that costs you more money. It costs us more money to have to put literally your money into the ground instead of being able to provide services for communities. So I could tell you more and more stories, but those are some of the key impacts that if we do not pay attention to climate change for all the other reasons why we do it, perhaps for those folks who still need persuading, the pocketbook will be the one they listen to.
Great, thanks very much, Mayor Horwath.
My job is easy. Ditto. I just say ditto to all of that. But there's two pieces I really do want to pick up on, and I agree with you. These are the things that as mayor I'm seized with, and I know that Mayor Meed Ward is as well. Just two examples, and I have many more, but as well. But to kind of fall in on what Mayor Meed Ward was talking about when it comes to the impacts on infrastructure. We've just reopened recently, fairly recently, one of our mountain accesses, one of our escarpment accesses. Why? Because of exactly that. The face of the escarpment is eroding and it is causing risk to people and to their safety, as well as requiring significant investment to remediate that more rapidly eroding rock face on the escarpment. So that would be just another example of the kinds of not only infrastructure and costs imperatives, but also safety and risk imperatives. And the flooding, again, I'm not going to go through the list, but all of these things equally, Hamilton is facing and concerned about, and the human impacts as well as the infrastructure impacts, and as well then, of course, the financial impacts. But one of the things that's maybe a little bit different is the impact on heat. Like the heat change that we're seeing is significant, and it's impacting the most vulnerable people in communities, and particularly in Hamilton. And one of the things that folks might not know is that we were identified by the University of Waterloo Intact Center on Climate Adaptation as one of the top 10 Canadian municipalities projected to have the greatest number of very hot days, over 30 degrees, the warmest maximum temperatures, and the longest heat waves in the future. So when you take just that one piece into consideration, and you juxtapose that against the kind of growth that's expected in our area, in the Hamilton area, I think it's something like close to 250,000 more homes by I think 2051 is the number. I can't recall specifically, but I think that's around the ballpark. How do we accomplish a city? How do we deliver a city that is able to deal with the climate change impacts that we see now, looking into the future when you see that pressure coming down the way? How do we make sure that we from now until then, continue to develop a climate resilient city? And as mayors, that's our job, along with our councillors. And I want to once again say hi to the councillors in the back, Councillor Kassar, Councillor Wang, Councillor Maureen Wilson, Councillor Taddison, I think, hiding behind Councillor Wang. I'm not sure. He's always hiding. Oh, it's not. There you go. Lucky. Lucky you did that, or I would have given Mark some kudos that I shouldn't have. But we also, one of the things we were also able to do is take up the mantle from the previous council. They decided we needed a climate strategy. I might be wading into another question, and so I'll stop there. This council's responsibility now is to make that live.
Mayor, you stole my lead in. And that is it. I mean, you talked an awful lot, both of you have talked an awful lot about the challenge ahead and the things that we're facing today. So what is your city doing to actually now tackle the climate change issues? So Mayor Horwath, why don't you go first?
I'll
this
just
time?
keep rolling.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So in August of 2022, that's what the city council did. They put together the climate action strategy, which is a community-wide strategy to reach net zero carbon by 2050. Now, in how we implement that, we have done a couple of things, I think, that our council can and should be proud of, including establishing the Office of Climate Change Initiatives, a brand new climate change reserve. So you can have the plan, but if you don't fund the plan doesn't get done. So we have the reserve that's being funded to the tune of $2.5 million annually. And we also have a great team of people who are working at that Office of Climate Change Initiatives. And I wanted to give a quick shout out to Linda Lukasic, who is here and who heads up that. Absolutely. and her team. Trevor Imhoff is here. Catherine Winkleman is here. Adam Watson is here. And we have around our city council table many councillors who are very much engaged and very much concerned about where we're headed. And so we've undertaken some pilot projects. We're doing some work already, and thanks to the work that's happening at that office. So we are piloting a home energy retrofit program called Better Homes Hamilton, committing about $1 million to help folks to switch to improve their energy efficiency. So in home improvements, that's a zero interest loan program. We have an urban forestry strategy that has been supported by council. And it's really great to see that our staff are also very much engaged in making sure these things are being implemented. So by 2050, we want to see 40% urban tree canopy in our city. Already, there has been a doubling of the annual tree planting targets from 12,000 to 20,000 a year already. And so that is, I think, something to celebrate. There are many other things as well, of course, as you would expect, capturing of methane gas from the wastewater treatment plant and from the Glanbrook landfill. We have an amazing e-bike program that's just actually expanded to more parts of our city, to Ward 4, I think, Councillor Wang. Yeah, I know, Ward 4. E-scooter program, of course, we have as well. We have a number of different programs, and it's very exciting to see. The other thing that's important is public transit, as you know, getting people out of their cars, because in Hamilton, we have our GHG emissions are primarily, well, number one is industry, of course, which makes us a little bit different. And number two is transportation, and number three is buildings. And so just looking at transportation, I think we have an LRT coming, but what we're doing, we do have an LRT coming. I'm only kidding you if there's any media in the room. We have an LRT coming, but we're also doing the work we need to do to get our HSR ready. We're expanding our HSR services. We're creating more linkages into that eventual LRT line, and that's important. It's also important to note that our commitment to public transit has already had benefits that we can measure. So in February, we're one of the few municipalities that by February of this year had not only completely recovered from our transit ridership losses during COVID, but we went to 102% in February. So that's really positive. I have more, but over to you.
Yeah.
Well, it's now my turn to say ditto. It's great that we are so aligned, because we're doing a lot of these things. And I did want to take you back in time a little bit to the last term of council. And I want to acknowledge Councillor Rory Nissan, who is here, who brought forward a resolution for us to declare a climate emergency. He's also now the deputy mayor for the environment. So all council members now have, with this term of council, have a portfolio to focus on an area that the city sees as strategically important and one of our priority areas. And of course, environment, which includes transportation, is one of those areas. So, but as you all know, it's not good enough to just sign a declaration, say lovely words. You have to put it into practice and into action. So we also have a corporate energy and emissions management plan. Our target is to be net carbon neutral by 2040. So what are we doing about that? So we had an old arena, an old ice rink, Skyway Arena in Burlington, that had to be decommissioned because it had CFCs, which are if not already illegal, about to be, and we couldn't use that cooling system anymore. We could have simply swapped out the cooling system. We decided that our community deserved a future-ready and a future-proofed facility that met a number of different needs in the community. But this is our very first community center that will be net carbon neutral. And yeah, please. It costs us a lot of money. So yes, please clap for that. But worth every penny. And, I'm pleased to say that when we went out to the community and said we could build a regular old community center the way we usually heat and cool it, or we could put solar panels, we could have geothermal, we could have, as I said, a future-ready, future-proof facility, but it's going to cost more. are you on for that? And they were. And nobody questions it now. It's a showcase. And we say this is actually not the future of Burlington. This is the today of Burlington. So as we start to build new facilities, which we will, with the help of some of our partners who are sitting in the front row here, thank you, Alinea, on your properties eventually. We know that that's going to be the standard, and probably technology we don't even know about yet that will come online, that we will make sure that we incorporate. We're also greening our city fleet. We are getting green buses soon. I think you might be ahead of us on that. Oakville is ahead of us, but we are starting to sort of walk the talk. We also have a climate action plan, and our target for the whole community is to be net carbon neutral by 2050. And that's a big goal because only 10% or so of emissions come from the government sector. The rest of it, in our case, is the buildings and transportation. So we really need the community to partner with us and to give them ways to do their part. And so we are doing that. Better Homes Burlington. So we have one of those programs too, supporting 0% interest loans for folks to install heat pumps. We just approved a solar panel building permit grant. So we cover the cost of grants that you would need to get a building permit to put solar panels. We also have a climate resilient Burlington plan. That's for adapting to what I said before, our warmer, wilder, wetter weather. We have invested $20 million in flood protection, and that's over the next 10 years. We have established warming and cooling centers for people in the community that need those. We also have, as you mentioned, an urban forestry master plan, and I really like your 40% because I think ours is 35. So friendly challenge. Well, like if I go 45, will you go 50?
That's the next question.
That's it. Okay. So, and we know that trees do way more than just look beautiful and bring our stress level down when we have a beautiful place to meet like this. They provide billions of dollars of heating and cooling infrastructure that we simply couldn't pay for. They extend the life of asphalt and all those great things. So we are very serious about our forest master plan. I also want to acknowledge another one of my colleagues who is here, Kelvin Galbraith. He is the Deputy Mayor for Business and Red Tape Reduction. And I mention that because climate change is also good business. Right? It is forward thinking, and we see businesses that are focusing on that. And it's great to see the businesses represented here today, the sponsors, the people that are saying it's not business or the environment, it's business and the environment doing it together. So I want to thank and acknowledge all the businesses that are in this room and the sector, the development sector that is looking at ways to make housing, which we know is our biggest one of our biggest crises right now, making housing more sustainable with green building guidelines and things that they'll do even before the government tells you to do these things, which is probably coming. But we really appreciate when developers adopt those sustainable development guidelines. So back to you.
Okay, appreciate it. So we're seeing a lot happening in the two cities, a lot of progress that's been made. The theme for today has been really about collaboration. So maybe we can talk a little bit about how you two see the cities working together and collaborating to help drive down carbon emissions.
Well, thank you for that. I want to start by saying that this is an example of that. I mean, just in our back and forth, talking about the friendly competition that we have as next door neighbors around some of the programs, but we learn from each other and our staff work with each other. And this very forum back helps us to have maybe a little bit of friendly competition, tension. Are you doing 40? 35, we're doing 40, 50, there you go. I want to acknowledge Councillor Maureen Wilson, who's been very, very active on the urban forest piece and really pushing the rest of us as a council, but also our staff to find the ways forward in that regard. But the politics, yeah, so climate change doesn't have any boundaries, right? I mean, it's not political boundaries or geographic boundaries. And us being neighbors so close, we do have a history of working on things in the past, which you would know very well. But I think about things like Randall's Reef. I think about other projects where, so we can banter about the, the competition, but the collaboration is extremely, extremely important. One of the things that we, just picking up on what Mayor Meed Ward said, is one of the things we are able to brag about is the passive house standards that our community City Housing Hamilton has been able to implement. So there's another example. And so if you want to talk about that housing piece, we can certainly share some of that. But this very forum helps us to do that. So thank you to you and to the team at BAC for giving this us this opportunity and helping us to have a focus for, or a space for, opening up the space for that collaboration in a more formal way. It's very much appreciated.
We know that air and water don't respect municipal boundaries. They go where they go. And so we have a shared bay, the Bay Area. We have a shared watershed. We have Hamilton councillors who sit on Conservation Halton, which is our shared watershed. It's actually 7 municipalities represented around that table. We've seen air quality from other provinces affect what we do here. And so we have to care about what happens in other municipalities in other cities. And so you mentioned Randall Reef, which at one time, I believe, was the #1 toxic site in the country. And there was lots of discussions about what to do about that. Fast forward to now, there has been a mitigation plan put in place. But it was very expensive. And so Hamilton came knocking, I think it was you guys, somebody came knocking on our door to ask if we would help to fund the mitigation of that project. The federal government was putting in some money, so was the province, City of Hamilton, of course. And I'm really happy to say that our city council at the time, this is going back to when I first joined council as a council member, didn't hesitate at all to say, yes, we'll do our part. So the council was very on board, but I can tell you some of my constituents were not. And they said, why are we funding something that is in Hamilton? And I think we gave, if memory serves, 2 million, 2.5 million over 10 years. It wasn't a small amount. And, you know, we all said, because some of our workers worked at the plants that contributed to this, and we all benefited from the steel that came out of those plants. And because we share a bay. That's why we share air, we share this land together. And so we should be helping to do our part to clean it up. So we did step in, and we have said on a number of occasions to our partners, not just in Hamilton, but around this whole region, we're there to help. Burlington is ready to step in. Coots to Escarpment. The Eco Park is another example that crosses our shared borders. Even this venue, Burlington's like just over there. we're in Hamilton here, but we get to share this beautiful space together, and we have to look after it. And you know, environmental commitment is about stewardship. It's about looking after the land while we are here, because it came before us. And it will be here long after we're here. So did we, for 7 generations, yes. The Indigenous residents have taught us that we need to plan and think about 7 generations ahead, not the next term of council, not my lifetime or yours, 7 generations out. And when we think that way, we can be better stewards of the land that we're on and the water that we share, and look at it as a gift for us in a moment. It's not ours. It's ours to make better. And you know, I love to hike, go out in the Bruce Trail, and they often talk about leaving the place that you step on better than you found it. And I think that's why, I know that's why Andrea and I both have gone into public service, is to leave the places, the cities, the communities that we are lucky enough to live in better than we found them. So that's what we're endeavoring to do.
I appreciate it. Thank you. We're down to the wire now, so I'm going to go with one last question. 2050 is not far away, and it's clear we need dramatic and urgent action on climate change. How can we accelerate our response to significantly reduce emissions? So,
I will start, but I'm going to be brief. What I think we need to acknowledge is that the municipal order of government has some capacity, but we're also reliant upon other orders of government as well to help us achieve exactly that, to help us get that urgent action happening. And just talking about order of magnitude in terms of costs, as Marianne was saying earlier, is significant. So we have to be as aggressive as we possibly can. I already mentioned where our major GHG emissions are coming from, but look at what's happening at one of those major emitters in Hamilton, right? It's ArcelorMittal's going from burning fossil fuels to electrification of their steelmaking process. It's the first. It's the one of the biggest and the first actually in the entire world to be doing that. So it's about making sure that as we look at the jobs of the future and the industries of the future, as well as the ones in operations today, and I'm glad for the sponsorship of the Industry Council. It's amazing. It's really important. We have to have those partnerships. We have to have those relationships. We have to work together to find the path forward for all of us, for industry, for the economy, for people, for the community, for the birds, the fish, the water, the air. That is our responsibility. I would also say that as we look to the future in terms of attracting investment in terms of the new jobs, we're also doing that as well. So we're trying to work closely with existing industry and partner and support initiatives that are already underway or that are they're trying to undertake. But we also have other things that we're trying to do to basically attract those jobs of the future that are based on green economies, that are based on new technologies, that are going to be the ones literally that help us with the transition. And the challenge I think that we all are going to have is how do we find those partnerships, not locally, but globally, frankly. And I think that our team in particular is doing some great work. GH Power has come to Hamilton, which is a company that just moved into the North End, who are using a new revolutionary method of hydrogen production. Hamilton Container Terminal, which is a new logistics hub down in the port, and it's taking something of the order of 200 trucks off the roads daily, which is nothing to sneeze at. And so these are some of the things when we look at how do we transport goods, how are we supporting those cutting edge new companies that will help us in the transition. So I have a whole other page, but I know that you're worried about the time. So the other thing, so that's a little bit of the kind of economic development side, but we have to really focus on the mitigation that we've already talked about. We have to focus on the adaptation. So we're doing things like, in fact, tomorrow at council, we'll have a report in front of us around, we have bylaws around and provincial legislation around providing heat to tenants in cold weather. We're talking about what can we be doing on the other side of that equation. So that's not before council tomorrow, but that conversation is happening at the city. Tomorrow we'll be talking about what can we do as a city to support the most vulnerable in terms of cooling centers and other initiatives. And so there's the now as well as the future. And I think we have a lot of creativity, but we also have a lot of work to do to find more solutions, to test them, to compete over them, and to implement them in a way that makes a difference in our communities.
thank you.
Just a couple of thoughts. First, I think we need to lead by example. So every person in this room has a network of people that look to you and learn from you, whether you think that they are or not. And so I know a number of us, my colleagues in the room included, myself included, have hybrid or electric vehicles as one example of how we can make a different choice. Many of us use public transit. I took the train today from Toronto. It's a much nicer way to get here and there. Use public transit as much as I can. So those in large ways and small, we need to lead by example. If we are telling people they need to make different choices and sacrifices and perhaps spend more money on something, because right now the investment in a green future costs more than the usual way. It costs more for governments, it costs more for people in the community. And so to encourage people to make that tough choice and give up something else that they would have used that money for, they need to see that we're making those choices too. So that is critically important. I think we have to give people opportunities to make a good choice as well. So you mentioned transportation and transit earlier. We have a integrated mobility plan that we've completed with money, because you can't just build plans and not fund them. But we have also tried to encourage people to take our public transit system by making it free for almost everybody. So it's free for kids under 12, youth, evenings and weekends, seniors 24/7, anyone who's low income. So if you qualify for the low income bus pass through Halton Region, we give you the other 50%. And those changes alone have increased, well, just the seniors change alone increased our ridership by 40%. Like incredible number. And that's more than just cars off the road. It's actually allowing people to participate and connect with their community, to be involved in the life of their city, to meet with family and friends, to come to events like this. So giving people that opportunity, we talked about the grants and the loans that we're providing for people who want to make the choice to have a different heating source in their homes. And then just continue to tell the story. So, and I don't say educate people because no one wants to be educated at, but there's a story to be told about why this is important and why our future and our present depends on it. I had somebody yesterday email me and ask me why we were spending money on electric vehicles. Apparently that's the new woke is the electric vehicle chargers. I haven't responded yet, but I will take the opportunity to share with this person in as generous a way as is possible, to say this is the future. We have to invest in these things, and your air that you get to breathe will be cleaner because of this. And I'll just leave with this last thought, a comic that I read many, many years ago, and I've used it in many audiences where not everyone agrees that climate change is real or important. And it really just says, what if we made the air cleaner and the water cleaner and had healthier forests and animals and people, and found out climate change was a hoax? Wouldn't we all be better off with clean air and clean water? Wouldn't we want to just do it because it's the right thing to do? And that usually works with most folks. At least it gets people thinking. So we're doing it because it's the right thing to do, but it also is the necessary thing to do.
Wow. Well, thank you both. You know, it's interesting to hear all the great things that both communities are doing. It's also interesting to listen to the things that Burlington is doing and Hamilton is not yet. Hamilton is doing and Burlington's not doing yet. But there's the opportunity to actually start working together on more of those issues. I know one that's always come to my mind is the Better Homes Burlington, Better Homes Hamilton. Why couldn't it be Better Homes Bay Area? One organization saves on costs, and we're able to drive it more efficiently. Anyway, lots of good ideas that have come out, and we appreciate both of you being here to do that. How about a round of applause for the two mayors? Okay, so I'm also, we have one more thing with the mayors to do, and I'm thrilled to announce that both Mayor Meed Ward and Mayor Horwath will be ceremonially signing a letter of commitment. This letter recognizes the city of Hamilton, city of Burlington will continue working together across municipal boundaries and collaboratively with BACCC to ensure that both cities achieve net zero by 2050. The content of the letter mirrors existing commitments made by each city in their memorandums of understanding with Mohawk College to support the Bay Area Climate Change Council. So I'm going to ask both of you to join me down at the table. Okay, we'll now move into the next portion of the evening, and I invite our new BAC manager, Jesse Elders, to the podium to share more about what BAC at its work and its strategic plan. So Jesse, over to you.
It's this time last year, and I'm in a mediation room, working unhappily as a litigator. I'm sitting with my client on one side of a long boardroom table. My client's opponent and their lawyer are sitting on the other. Everyone's arms are crossed, and no one is making eye contact. We are mediating to try to reach a collaborative resolution that will avoid a trial. But despite this collaborative intention, the atmosphere in the room is tense, charged. We're all on guard. As the opposing side starts to share their story, my client, sitting next to me, starts to huff audibly. We're not going to reach an agreement today, I think, and this is going to drag on. The other side moves on to explain something specific about their recollection of what happened. And at that moment, my client grabs a sticky note, scribbles furiously, and passes me the note. I read what's written. They're lying. Well, it looks like we're on to a costly trial. And I feel so frustrated. If the parties could work together, they could find a mutually beneficial pathway through their conflict and to a better outcome overall. And this case is about a minor dispute. We have big challenges as a society. If these parties can't resolve their conflict about a roof installation, how do we have any hope of solving our most complex challenges, like climate change? And then I see it. A job posting for the Bay Area Climate Change Council's manager. The posting calls for an expert collaborator to support the Hamilton-Burlington Bay Area's transformation into a thriving net zero community. Now, I have become an expert in conflict, but I would love to be an expert collaborator instead. My gut says to apply. And as I prepare my application, I feel more and more confident. BACC's values align with my own. Urgent action toward net zero. Rapid reduction of emissions from buildings, industry, and transportation. A just transition, making sure that no one gets left behind as we transition to a low carbon economy. And BACC's identity as a collective impact initiative stands out. The members of BACC come from a wide range of sectors who don't traditionally work together. They commit to a collaborative approach to achieve transformational change in response to our climate crisis. Now, this is something I can really get behind. This is the collaborative approach that we need to solve complex problems. It's a couple of months later. My job interview is at Mohawk College in the beautiful Joyce Center, which is a stunning example of a local net zero building, producing more clean energy than it consumes. As I walk up to the building, I think, yeah, this is a cool building. I can't believe I could work here. My interviewers are a subcommittee of BACC council members, leaders from Environment Hamilton, the Hamilton Industrial Environmental Association, and Hamilton Health Sciences. From outside of the interview room, I can hear them chatting. Lots of conversation, lively. They welcome me into the interview room, and I take a seat at the boardroom table. I'm thinking, wow, these folks are all actually here, dedicating their time to advance a net zero initiative. And honestly, I wasn't sure whether I could expect this. Coalitions can sometimes be things that you sign on to, but don't actively participate in. But here they are, sitting around the table, committed to making their collective a success. And the energy in this boardroom is so much different than the ones I've been used to. No one's arms are crossed. Everyone is leaning in, making eye contact. They share the space with each other to ask questions of me and talk about the work of their organizations. And then something happens that I will never forget. The leaders of an industry association and a grassroots environmental organization make some sort of quip at each other about how they aren't always on the same side. But at the same time, they're smiling, teasing, friendly. They've clearly built a relationship through BACC. And then someone says, look, this can be hard work, but we're all still here. And I feel a kind of giddy optimism that can be hard to find when we talk about climate change. This collaboration seems real and committed. And now that I'm standing here today, having worked with BACCC since last fall, I can confirm that our collaborative approach is working. Since I started, we've completed a strategic planning process, developing our priorities for the next 3 years. Given the complex nature of climate change and the range of folks around the table, I was sure that our conversations would become adversarial, but they didn't. Unlike my litigation client, who couldn't listen to the other side's story, members around the BACCC table commit to understanding each other and the complexity of the problem before us. If there's an area of disagreement, they don't become entrenched. They create new pathways that we haven't thought of yet to move forward. And importantly, I'm happy to report that I have not been passed any angrily scribbled sticky notes. We have a lot of urgent work to do. We have to eliminate our emissions and fast. As we heard earlier, our cities have ambitious climate action plans. BACCC recently released its own strategic plan. And I'm sure that many of you in this room and online have your own plans to get to net zero. Along the way, we'll have many decision moments and opportunities to either come together or pull apart, to lean into the complexity of this problem or to shrink away from it. This can be hard work, but we're all still here. Thank you.
Thanks, Jesse. Now you know why we think we made a great choice. We're now going to move into the next part of our program, and I'm going to introduce our presenting sponsor, Alina. I'd like to welcome Lou Fraporti, representing our presenting sponsor, Alina, to the podium. Lou is a partner with Gowling WLG, an advisory to Alina Land Corporation, and a passionate champion of Hamilton, Burlington, and Mohawk College. Lou, over to you.
For those of you that know me, there is no truth to the rumor that I was a lawyer on the other side of Jesse's file in that case. But given the disruptions that AI is going to be bringing to advocacy, I suspect there's going to be a lot more litigation lawyers coming to the climate change industry in the near term. Before I begin my prepared remarks, I would like to invite all of you to direct your attention to the screen and watch a couple of friends take a stroll in a park.
My name is Calvin Galbraith. I'm the Ward 1 Councillor here in Burlington and Deputy Mayor for Business.
And I'm Rory Neese. I'm Ward 3 Councillor and Deputy Mayor for the Environment.
Although you wouldn't know it, you're standing at the epicenter for the 1200 King Road development project.
It's a future that's big, bright, and green.
And when the private sector and the public sector work together to promote sustainability, the sky's the limit.
Well, I very much want to thank Kelvin and Roy for being such good sports about that. They'll be here later signing autographs at the table if you want to get one. And I'd also like to acknowledge Hamilton film producer Mo Masudi, who very graciously and creatively put that particular video together. Alinea is privileged to sponsor this event, as am I, for the opportunity to speak to you briefly this evening, not only to introduce the keynote speaker, which I'm sure we're all excited to hear, but to share Alinea's perspective on how it's prioritizing collaboration to help build thriving, resilient, more climate-friendly cities. Alinea emerged with new owners and leadership over 3 years ago, determined to take its large and diverse inventory of land assets and a range of other resources, including a very significant pledge to the Hamilton Community Foundation, and leverage them thoughtfully and quickly to create broad-based impact in Burlington and Hamilton. These assets included hundreds of acres of land in both communities, much of it strategic to our cities, like King Road, all potentially yielding tens of thousands of residential units, a broad range of significant community amenities, billions in investment, and thousands of jobs. While it's one thing to have a big, hairy, audacious goal for you, Jim Collins fans, it's quite another to execute on it, to know how. And so in order to figure that out, we embarked on a listening tour of political, educational, private sector, and not-for-profit leaders, including many of you, asking for your views and needs and inviting conversation. And where we found receptive and supportive engagement, we work to integrate those needs and that learning into our efforts. Through that process, one insight became glaringly clear, perhaps already obvious to all of you. The solutions we seek, success, however we define it, particularly in the area of climate change, cannot be secured through government interventions in the market alone. They can only be realized through embrace by the private sector, through technical innovation and incented risk-taking through elevated and strategic philanthropy and corporate social responsibility programming, and through better collaboration with the public, educational, and social enterprise sectors. Among other things, this insight has led us to an initiative and partnership we are very proud of and which we hope can be a model for others working to promote urban regeneration. Over the last several months, Alinea has worked with leaders at Mohawk College to explore the creation of a comprehensive corporate strategy that looks to pioneer approaches to the adoption of more sustainable practices in development and construction, approaches that are commercially viable and therefore more easily adoptable by industry. And in so doing, to create a living laboratory of experiential learning at King Road and potentially on others of its development sites. I'm excited to say that this effort will encompass funding for research and experiential learning through the Mohawk College Foundation. Ultimately, Alinea is resolved to not only leave behind a massive inventory of transformational urban infrastructure, but to leave a legacy of innovation in sustainability, which includes educating the next generation of skilled trades and technologists in green building practices. You'll hear a great deal more about that effort at King Road and beyond in the coming months, and we may even be asking for your help. In closing, and for those that are unaware, Alinea in Latin means starting a new chapter. This is what this looks like to us. We hope it inspires others to start their own chapters in promoting the creation of thriving, resilient, and more adaptable cities. And with that, allow me to introduce our distinguished keynote speaker, Jennifer Keesmaat. Is she here? Awesome. Jennifer is the president and CEO of Collective Marquee. Do I have that right? And the former chief city planner for the city of Toronto. Jennifer is an urban planner named one of the most powerful people in Canada by Maclean's, one of the most influential by Toronto Life, and one of the top women of influence in Canada. She spent half a decade as Toronto's chief city planner, where she was celebrated for her forward-thinking and collaborative approach to city building. She is president and CEO of Collective Marquee, developing new communities across the GTA as sustainable, livable places that prioritize access to high-quality, affordable housing. We may need to speak later. A distinguished visitor in residence emeritus at the University of Toronto, Jennifer continues to share her vision for cities of the future through her Weeby award-winning podcast, Invisible City. Jennifer is the chief architect of the 2020 Declaration for Resilience in Canadian Cities, which is a blueprint for adapting cities post-COVID-19 that has been adopted by cities around the world. Jennifer is on the advisory board of the Urban Land Institute Toronto, and is appointed to the International Panel of Experts, Singapore Urban Redevelopment Authority. She's on the President's Planning and Growth Advisory Board and Design Review Panel for Ohio State University, and is recognized as the 100 most influential urbanists of all time by Planet Zen magazine. Please join me in warmly welcoming Jennifer to the stage.
Perfect. Just looking for the clicker. Well, hi, everyone. Isn't this an exciting event? It's wonderful to have two mayors in the room, and even more wonderful to see those two mayors coming together around climate action in such a specific and bold way. Jesse, I have to say, boy, is BACC ever lucky to have you. I loved your story. And the future is collaborative. That's a really big part of what I'm going to talk about today. And I think we are seeing that embodied by the approach of BACC, embodied by two key political leaders in this region. And it means that, unlike most conversations about climate, this is one that has kind of a bit of an upbeat tone, which is really unusual, because usually we get in front of these rooms and we talk about how hard it is, and we talk about how much we need to get done. And today we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to really talk in this presentation about three key things: about the importance of belief, about understanding, and action. Now, I suspect I'm standing here in front of a room full of believers, people who both believe, obviously, in climate change, but also believe in the power of change, and believe that there are things that we can do in our policy making, through our political leadership, and in our everyday lives that can result in change. And sometimes we wake up in the morning and belief is a really tall order. Sometimes it's difficult to believe. And so I wanted to start by just talking about some of those things that hit us on the chin sometime. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about belief. And then I'd like to focus in on the importance of understanding, because there's a risk. There's a risk if we believe in change. There's a risk if we believe but we don't understand. There's also a risk if we believe and we don't act, or if we believe and we, in fact, become immobilized because of what we understand. So linking together belief, understanding, and action is fundamental to both living in a hopeful way, but also changing our cities and our regions. So some of the drivers for change, I'll go through this very quickly. We know that the shocks that affect us, the pandemic was a really significant one. The forest fires that literally forced us inside last year. We know those shocks and crises are going to continue to accelerate. We also know that incrementalism is part of the problem. One of the interesting things about how we responded to the pandemic was we were not incremental. I'm fascinated by how quickly we had action, how quickly governments acted. There was a crisis, we acted. There was a crisis, people changed the way they lived their everyday lives. People stayed home. People responded directly to policy changes immediately. We should remember that we don't need to be incremental in how we approach climate change. We can actually embrace drastic action. Let's make sure we understand what we're doing, but we can embrace drastic action. And I would argue that we're being way too incremental in light of the magnitude of the challenges that we face and the threat to human life on this planet. We also know that relying on others past the buckism has become deadly. It's time for us to own the future. It's time for us at the individual level, at the city level, at the regional level, at the national level. All of us have a sphere of influence. And within that sphere of influence, we can impact change. And I'm going to show you at the end of this presentation how I'm doing that in my sphere of influence, in the work I do every day, how I really own that idea of taking action and not passing the buck. We also know, and this is really the rub, we know that timeless principles of urbanism that define a sustainable future with shared prosperity, we've known them for a very long time. They're actually not new. We know how to build sustainable places. And yes, you heard in the introduction, I'm a land use planner. I now build homes and communities, but I am going to talk to you about how we use land. Because it doesn't matter how many electric bikes and electric cars we have if we continue planning our land the same way we're planning it today. We need to plan our land in a fundamentally different way if we want to create a future where we are not dependent on fossil fuels. What that means, I knew there were believers in the room. What that means is that we need to go back to some of those timeless principles of urbanism. And I'll talk about that a little bit in the context of understanding. And then lastly, this is really critical, planning for social connectedness and belonging will mitigate disaster for vulnerable populations. Amazingly, we continue to see with all of our AI and all of our prosperity and all of our ingenuity, we see more people in distress than ever in our cities. And thinking and planning about for vulnerable populations as we move forward in creating a more sustainable future is a fundamental part of the crisis that we need to respond to as well. So I have to ask this question, and I'm going to talk a little bit about belief. Do we have a crisis of belief in the future of our cities and our regions? I actually think we do. I think we're at a very unique and strange moment in our history. And it is in part because of the pressures that our cities face, the number of people we see in distress. It is in part because of some of the sustained growth that we've had over the course of the past 20, 30 years that has deeply entrenched patterns of development that are really based on a land-intensive form of living. And if we're going to move away from that, we need to design differently. That feels like a very tall order to create fundamentally different kinds of places. So what I'd like to do is show you what I'll call maybe some clues, some things that I think can help us with our belief, because we need to believe it's the absolute starting point that we can design better, that we can plan better, that we can be more inclusive in how we design our cities. So this is a little bit about believing. And because we have a room full of believers, I'll go through this relatively quickly. Well, we need to believe that we can create clean land, air, water as a first priority. You might think this is a shot of some buildings and a meadow. In fact, this is the largest rooftop green roof in the city of Toronto. As we have become denser in the city of Toronto, our air quality's gotten better. Imagine that. In the downtown core, which is 17 square kilometers of Toronto, a relatively small area, as we've been adding more density, we've been seeing the commuting by car significantly decrease for people who live in the downtown. That doesn't mean there aren't a lot of cars in the downtown, which actually speaks to the way we're interconnected as a region. But in downtown Toronto, where we have a population of about 375,000 people, 75% of the residents in downtown Toronto commute by walking, cycling, or transit. We have seen our air quality get significantly better as we become denser. We believed we could do this. We're in the process of doing it, and it's something that can be done elsewhere as well. We also need to believe, and we do have examples of that we can build walkable, inclusive, mixed-use neighborhoods that are a part of complete communities, and that this can be a part of our future and offer a high quality of life. And I'm going to pause here for a second. I'm going to talk about this at the very end, but this is one of the communities that I'm building. And we often think and talk about how we can't change our housing, that housing is unaffordable, but most people want the Canadian dream of a large home with a 2-car garage. That dream is actually over. It's ended. And it's ended for a very simple reason. It's completely inconsistent with the sustainable future. It's also completely unaffordable by any municipality that doesn't have some outside source of funding, because it's a very, very costly way to plan and use land. We need to think differently. I like the comment that you made about we don't really want to use the word educate. Well, we wrote into our official plan that if we're going to change the future, we need to change our minds. We need to collectively change our minds about what the future can look like, what the future can be. And amazingly, we might stumble upon something better. And the short story I wanted to tell about this is that we were doing the planning and design for this community, which is 1,400 homes in a walkable community. All the parking associated with the development is below grade, so it's a very pastoral kind of landscape. And my daughter, who grew up in Midtown Toronto in a single family home, not far from the subways, but in a single family home in a rapidly densifying area. And she has no illusions about home ownership. She's 23 years old in 2024. The idea of owning a home is absolutely crazy town to her. And Alexandra saw this community in a presentation that I was doing. Because it was a pandemic, it was online, so she popped in and watched it. And as I was making my presentation, I was suddenly completely off kilter because my phone started blowing up, and it was my daughter saying, "Mom, is there any chance I could live there?" So this notion of what the future can be and how good the future can be when it's a green future is something that another generation already gets and already understands. We also, and this is from King's Cross in London, England, we also know that we can create an economy that is diverse, that has well-paying jobs that are both stable and fulfilling, with employment opportunities that are linked to and deliver on a green economy. We aren't necessarily doing that, but there are places in the world that are, and we can look to those places and we can believe and we can see a future that we can also create. This is an obvious one. This is from Melbourne, Australia, but we can believe in and know that it's possible because others have done it, creating a comprehensive, high quality, affordable, both local and regional transit network that both supports walking and cycling. It's really difficult to create walkable communities when at a regional scale you have to drive everywhere. There's a whole bunch of ripple effects, including the fact that you need parking in your cities, a lot of parking. A regional transit enables walkable destinations. We need to make those links in a much stronger way in our region, but there are places where we are doing this. And of course, this is an example from the City of Toronto, where we're getting closer and closer every day. We have $33 billion worth of subways and LRT under the construction in the city. There's a lot of disenchantment with movement in the city, but we're getting there. We're probably about 20 or 30 years behind, but we are moving there. And there are places where you can see that in the landscape of the city. Green spaces, of course, if we add density and we don't create the amenities for everyday life, there's this incredible risk that we just build vertical suburbs. We have lots of tall and sprawl. So ensuring that we have the green spaces that bring people together, as well as the recreational opportunities that are within walking distance of home, we know we can then offer a very high quality of life. We also know we need natural spaces, and this is a development in Amsterdam, which is not oriented around roads or cars. Of course, there's a very high cycling population, but you will see the biodiversity in the landscape. The entire community has not been planned with grass, but has been planned with gardens. It's actually an edible landscape. There are places that are doing this really well, and we can go and we can see them, but we can also emulate them. We also know that we need and we ought to believe in cultural and community facilities that can honor the past and lead us into the future. This is an important building because it was created during the AIDS epidemic as a hospice, but it's no longer a hospice. It's now a place of healing. And it's one of the leading institutes for AIDS treatment in the world. And this is in the city of Toronto. It tells a really important story about what matters in our city, and protecting the building and expanding on the building is a really important part of believing in who we are and who we will be moving into the future. Beautiful architecture and excellent urban design that astonishes and inspires. This is a fountain in a park that we created in downtown Toronto as a result of new development, Section 37 money, as it used to be called, a community contribution from the developer. But the goal here was to create a very urban place and space for gathering. We know we can do this. We don't do it everywhere, but we know we can if we make that our aspiration and our belief. And then lastly, affordable housing. This one, I didn't make it last because it's the least important. I made it last because it's the one I want to carry through the rest of the presentation. Because if we do everything right, but we don't get this right, if we don't have housing for everyone at every stage of life, we will fundamentally fail as we move into the future. And affordable housing is absolutely a critical part of climate action. And high quality housing that is going to be sustainable into the future is a fundamental part of climate action. Does anyone recognize this picture? Does anyone know where this is from? This is Regent Park in Toronto. And it's a really great example because we, of course, have LEED buildings, but we thought very carefully about the relationship between community spaces, green spaces, housing affordability, and intensity. And I think that we've demonstrated quite well here that you can create really strong vertical communities, that you can have density and a really strong sense of place and community. So that's about believing. And I wanted to begin with some things to believe in, because there are things that we can believe in, that each one of us can believe in, and we can find examples from around the world. I'm often asked what my favorite city is, and I often say, well, it depends on what we're talking about, because it's a different answer if we're talking about transit or affordable housing or community spaces or wilderness in the city or green infrastructure. And what I wanted to show in the believe section of this is that there might not be the perfect city, there might not be the perfect place in any of our cities, but there are places and ideas that we can draw inspiration, that we can bring into our city and our region building that lead to a very different outcome than what we have today. So belief is fundamental to getting started, but we really need to understand what we're doing. If we don't understand what we're doing, we've got a very big risk on our hands, because we might end up doing something that doesn't actually deliver a better future. So I'm going to show you two extremes of what we currently have been doing in terms of how we've been building out where we live. On the one side of the spectrum, and I'll talk a bit about the vision and the dream. On the one side of the spectrum, we've been creating monocultures, places where you can really only live in one type of housing. There's usually one type of tenure you can only own. There isn't a combination of rental and ownership. There's usually only really one way to get around, which is in a car. And there is a very waste-intensive approach to development. Then on the other side of the scale, there is a diversity of housing tenures. You can own and you can rent. This is a place where you both produce food and consume food, as opposed to importing food and exporting waste. You can actually produce and consume in one location. And it's also a place where you can live out through a variety of different types of families in a variety of different stages of life. Importantly, it's an environment where, particularly if you're close to transit, you have the option of living without a car, which is really the foundation of how we need to be thinking about our region moving forward. Thinking about designing and planning places where not only is it convenient to live without a car, but it's a first choice. It's the better way to live. It's the best way to live. So really, we have two extremes here that need to be the foundation of our climate action, and they come back to how we use land. One is based on continuing to grow out, and the other is about growing up. And it isn't just about density, because I do think one of the reasons we get so much blowback, much of which I think is kind of legitimate in our communities around intensification, is because we've done not a great job of creating complete communities, environments where you get density and the promise of density. And the promise of density is spectacular public spaces, great public amenities and places for gathering, really high quality housing where you can move through a whole variety of stages of life. That I call delivering on the promise. If we don't deliver on the promise of density, we'll continue to have blowback to density. So that's why we've got to get the affordable part right. We've got to get the green spaces right, the quality of life right, and critically, how we get around. The mobility piece is a critical part to get right. So I'd like to shift and talk a little about how that comes together in action. And there's three key pieces to this. The first is that the only way we ever change anything is by identifying shared interests. Building housing, creating communities, governing municipalities, incredibly complex stuff. There's so many different players. You need private sector actors and public sector actors. You need not-for-profit organizations. You need community-based organizations. You need the banks involved, but you also need the federal government involved, handing out money. Identifying shared interests really becomes the bedrock of how we can advance change. Second is, of course, using your sphere of influence. A municipality has a sphere of influence. BACCC has a sphere of influence. We all have a sphere of influence that we can use in a variety of different ways. The third is delivering on the promise. The third is linking together our action, our collaborations, and it's hard to deliver on the promise. It's actually easier to do things halfway, and this goes back to my point about incrementalism. I think one of the reasons we get so much blowback when we talk about intensification and infill is because we haven't delivered on the other parts of the promise. If we just add more density to our neighborhoods, but we don't get transit right, we're just going to create a big chaotic traffic mess in our local neighborhoods, and no kid will ever play ball hockey ever again on a street. I live at Yonge and Eglinton, one of the densest neighborhoods in North America. Outside my window, I see cranes and density. I'm a stone's throw from the subway. But my kids growing up played ball hockey and basketball on the street. The neighborhood had all of the elements that allowed us to have walking and cycling and transit despite having a tremendous amount of density. We kind of have to deliver it all, or we're only going to get a part. And if we only get a part, there will be a significant amount of unhappiness. So that leads me to linking together those three ideas in a project that we have underway right now in my company. This is Tyndale Green, 56 acres in a suburb of Toronto. The shared interest is with an institution, a private university, that wanted to better connect into the neighborhood and to provide affordable housing, using their land as an asset to contribute to this critical challenge that we face in the city of Toronto. So identifying the shared interest was creating a sustainable, walkable community, and doing so in such a way that we are creating spaces for people who have been traditionally excluded from housing in the city to have access to housing in the city. We've really focused on delivering on the promise by offering a really high quality of life. It's a pastoral landscape, but it's really right in the heart of the city. There's a BRT line adjacent to the site. The site links into the Ravine network, and you can get on your bike and you can cycle 15 kilometers and be in downtown Toronto on a trail that would look like a trail that you would see out the window here, but it runs right through the heart of the city of Toronto. We've integrated an affordable daycare. We've integrated a recreation facility. We've integrated a whole series of amenities that are about delivering on the promise. It's not just housing, it's a community in a green and lush, sustainable landscape. With respect to using your sphere of influence, which is kind of my third part of acting, when I left the city of Toronto after being on the policy and design side for the first 2/3 of my career, I asked the question about my final act. And I realized that I wanted to use the skills that I'd built over the first few phases to bring together people to deliver on what I believe is one of the biggest challenges of our time, which is building sustainable communities and affordable housing. And so Tyndale Green is about the way I've been bringing together those various components in order to act. Thank you very much.
And thank you so much for, yes, we have extra chairs. Come closer. So we have the chance now to just do a brief fireside chat. Thank you so much for your presentation. I'm furiously taking notes because I have too many questions and not enough time. Just as a reminder too, I am keeping track of audience questions, so I will try to weave them into our discussion. If you would like to ask a question, you can use the QR code above or the access code 19517431. So before we dive into it in more detail, I'd actually like to ask a personal question, which is that you've become a very strong voice for climate action and climate action in cities. And I wonder if you could share a little bit about why that's become an important focus for you.
It's so funny that you say that because many years ago when I graduated from planning school and I did a degree, my master's degree was in environmental studies with a focus on urban planning. And no one wanted to talk about sustainability. Very few people did. You had to be in the right audience. It was not a mainstream conversation at all, not even remotely. And so in my brain, I was like, oh, well, what I'm going to do then is talk about livability and walkable communities, because who doesn't want to live in a walkable neighborhood? Who doesn't want to live in a neighborhood where you can walk to a coffee shop, where you can take your kids to the dentist or the doctor or to daycare on a bike? Who doesn't buy into that dream? And what I discovered was that that dream was very saleable, that it was possible to sell that dream. And I began doing work in places like Saskatoon and Regina and Lethbridge. We did the Halifax downtown plan. The Regina plan we actually called Walk to Work, which was a really radical idea. But the truth is, the plan could have been called How to Build a Sustainable City. But no one wanted to hear that kind of language 20 years ago. So it's kind of a funny thing because you've positioned it a little bit like there's been a change in what I'm talking about. And actually, I'm still talking about the same old stuff that I was talking about 20, 30 years ago. But now I'm not afraid to say the word sustainability. And in fact, I've had instances where I haven't said the word sustainability and I've talked about sustainability and people have said, now, could you talk about sustainability a little bit? And my response is, yeah, it's about creating communities that are not dependent on fossil fuels. It's about using land in a different way. That's the root of our sustainability. That is going to be the future of sustainability. And, you know, organizations like NASA are suddenly catching up and are saying, hey, the only way we're going to change climate change is if we all get out of our cars. And if to get out of our cars, we need to design our communities differently. And I'm like, NASA's saying that? Cool. That's great.
And sustainable city and climate friendly city go they go hand in hand, obviously. So yeah, feel free to, there's water there. I might grab some too. So I guess one of the things that really stood out to me about your talk, you have an ability to kind of ground us in like, what is a net zero city or a city of the future, a sustainable city going to look and feel like? And Hamilton and Burlington are both very diverse communities. We have dense urban cores alongside suburban and rural landscapes. And I always find thinking about complete communities, it's easier to imagine in a downtown core. So I wonder if you could speak a little bit about, in the context of land use planning, how do we take these diverse parts of our cities and turn them into a future that looks and feels like the one you've described?
Well, I love it that you've said that because I'm actually sort of the opposite. Like I look out this window and a complete community and a dense community is something that's easier for me to imagine, in part because really critical to getting dense cities and regions right is knowing really clearly where development won't go. What will you not develop? We know very clearly here what we will not develop. And the risk, of course, is that you don't protect those things while you still can. And so I look at this area of the region, I'm like, well, there's a lot that's protected that needs to stay protected, which also in turn makes it very clear where intensification and growth should go, where it belongs. So when I was a chief planner, one of my key initiatives was actually our ravine strategy. And look, I wasn't the head of parks. I had to go on bended knee to the commissioner of parks and convince her to be a part of this initiative. And I said to her, look, we need to be talking about our ravines, which is 17% of the land area in Toronto. We need to be talking about and investing in our ravines as really critical public spaces and open spaces and natural spaces, because that's a critical part of the social contract that enables us to be building out a dense city. You have to link those two things together. So in some ways, for me, it's a little easier when I see really green places because I'm like, that's the counterpoint. That's the other side of the coin. And the risk is always in places where people just think everything's a development parcel. And so you've got some of that infrastructure here already. And hopefully the social contract that you can build in Hamilton and in Burlington is a recognition that precisely because there are places that we don't want to build, where we don't want to build housing, that we want to protect as our green infrastructure from a stormwater management perspective and a green space perspective. That's why we shouldn't have so many surface parking lots in the downtown. Those two things go hand in hand. And I will say the densest cities I've been in the world, I've been in quite a few cities, the densest cities with the highest quality of life they're also the greenest cities. They're very green. And I would say, I was thinking about this today. I have phenomenal access to nature. I live at Midtown, one of the densest places in North America. And because I'm running the Sporting Life 10K next weekend, I was trying desperately to train. And it's 2 kilometers from my house. I hit the ravine system, and I can run from my house down to the brickworks. And I'm in a trail where you cannot see, hear. I might as well be at Spring Valley, where I used to run as a kid. Like, I am deep in nature, but I'm right in the heart of the city. And to me, that's a critical part of livability and sustainability.
Mhm. Yeah, I was very struck by your comment that as density increases in the downtown core in Toronto, the air quality actually goes up. So I think on that note, I wonder if you could, transportation is obviously a big part of what we need to do to address climate change. In the Hamilton and Burlington region, 17% of our emissions come from basically driving our cars. And we need to reduce that in order to meet our climate goals. And BACC has been working on this for a number of years. We spent a lot of time researching an options for travel report, which tried to identify barriers to taking active or sustainable transportation. And because of the nature of our work, we focus a lot on how can we connect to cities? What does interregional transportation look like? So you mentioned this, that actually one of the challenges of densification and transportation is that when we still need a car to move between cities, we run into challenges in our own city's sustainability goals. So I wonder if you could speak a little bit about that aspect, about interregional transportation, and I guess particularly with a view to our cities here. We're connected, we're close together, and we're working to try to integrate our transportation systems.
So I talked about how we actually integrated into our official plan that if we were going to change the future of the city, we needed to change our minds. We needed to think differently about how we live. We needed to think differently about how we move. We also put something kind of radical into our plan, which is if we're going to become a more sustainable city, we need to move less. We all need to move less. And I think there's a really big clue in that around how we need to be thinking about the way we're going to live in the future, which is we actually are going to move less. And one of the things that can enable us to move less is the more we create complete communities. The more complete our community becomes, the more likely it is, and the denser our community becomes, the more likely it is that we're going to find friends in our community, that we'll find shared interests for social reasons, clubs, for places of worship within our community, within walking distance of where we live. The more likely it is that we'll be able to find services within our community, that we'll have daycare, for example, that's a short walk away instead of a commute away on a bus or a drive away. So the density actually delivers something that's incredibly valuable. The language Jane Jacob used was she talked about sufficient density. And I think this is a really critical question to wrestle with. What is sufficient density that means people start going, you know what, we're going to walk out for dinner. We're going to go to our dentist. We're going to get a dentist that's within walking distance of home. I'm going to go to a yoga studio or whatever it is, or a community facility. We're going to have hockey that's in our neighborhood. So I think this notion of when you start to have sufficient density, you start to do more things within your neighborhood. You start to do more things closer to home. And then the things that you do that demand regional travel aren't things like commuting and everyday things, but more special things, visiting friends, family that may be outside of your neighborhood, which is inevitably going to be the case. So I think this idea of having sufficient density is a really critical one. I ran an experiment on this. So I was, of course, born in Hamilton. I'm a very proud Hamiltonian. My husband was born in Toronto in Etobicoke and would very happily have lived out the rest of his life in Etobicoke. But when we got married, we moved into the High Park area, which was very, very, very frighteningly urban for him. And then a little later, because we wanted to go down to one car for a period of time, no cars. We moved into Midtown because we wanted to be right on the subway line. And so when I'm in Toronto, my primary ways of commuting are cycling and transit. And the bike share has really expanded that even further. But when we moved into Midtown, I basically was like, you know what? Okay, I have these two kids. I'm working full time. We're only doing after school activities that are within walking distance of home. That was like a family decision that we made. And it cut out a lot of things that you can't do. So after school, it had to be within walking distance of home, our activities. But we were in like a dense enough urban place that, lo and behold, we had like 4 ballet studios for my daughter when she was like 5. We had like 4 ballet studios to choose from. And I also decided, okay, well, my kid's dentist has to be within a 5-minute walk of home. So we found a dentist that was 5 minutes from home. So when my kids were like 9 years old, they started going to the dentist. I'm almost ashamed to say it. They started going on their own because I would be like, well, you know how to get there. Go to the dentist. I've got to work. I can't take you. So we started, my kids have been very independent from a very young age because we lived in a neighborhood where they could just go do stuff in the neighborhood, getting our hair cut. We're like, okay, all the kids are going to get their haircut in the neighborhood because I'm not getting in a car and driving for 20 minutes for a haircut. But that only becomes possible. You only have that choice if you have enough density to make that a real choice. And I will also say that not everyone wants that, and that's okay. Right? Like this is all about increasing choice. It's not about taking choices away. And for me, I saw my quality of life go up as I went into a more urban environment and I had more mobility choices and I had more choices for the way I could live within my neighborhood, even though I still had to get on the subway to get downtown to work every day.
Right. So you may have heard, we focus on, and we've touched on transportation, so I'm going to touch on buildings, which is the next part, because we really focus on trying to reduce emissions within our region in what we call the big 3: industry, transportation, buildings, the largest sources of carbon pollution in our region. So BACC imagines a future where we're building new buildings to a net zero standard, where we're doing deep retrofits on existing buildings to ensure that they're energy efficient and fossil fuel free. And of course, ensuring that they're more resilient to extreme weather events. And given your unique place in the field, I feel like I can ask you the elephant in the room, which you touched on, which is, can we achieve affordable housing and sustainable housing at the same time?
So this is a very tricky thing. And I say that as someone who is trying to do both. And a little shout out to my team because we opened the first week of April. We started handing out keys for a new building that we've built on Wilson Avenue, right near the subway station. And at the time of its opening, it's called Nordic, if you want to check it out online. At the time of its opening, it had the highest green standard of any other building in the city of Toronto. And we have Habitat for Humanity units in that building because it's a condo. So we partnered with Habitat for Humanity for the affordable component. So there's an affordable component, very, very green building, which is an absolute critical priority for us as a company, thinking about the neighborhood and how we plan in relation to transit for sustainability, how we design the building and how we design the unit. We think at all those different scales. That being said, I don't think you could do that building again with today's interest rates because the cost of building, the cost of borrowing for the construction period has gone up and the cost of construction has also gone up. So I do think this is a dilemma that lends very well to a government that wants to take a very aggressive approach to affordable housing delivery. The government needs to be coming in and playing a greater role in ensuring access to housing. Now, the mayors in the room have to close their ears because they won't like this, but the truth is, right now, development charges in many cities, the city of Toronto is one of them, is about a quarter of the cost of a new home. So a quarter of the cost of a new home actually The city charges the developer passes that on to the home builder. That increases the cost of the home significantly. I'm a huge proponent. I think that worked in a low interest rate environment, but it doesn't work in a high interest rate environment because the cost of borrowing is so challenging for getting new homes built. I'm a big proponent of provincial governments creating an infrastructure fund, because really what we've done right now is we've taken the cost of infrastructure and we've put it on new homeowners, which some people have really identified as a bit of an intergenerational crime, because I'm not sure why 25-year-olds today should be covering the cost of new infrastructure when an earlier generation really truly did not. So I think we need to throw out the development charge model. It doesn't work anymore. It doesn't work in a high interest rate environment. Doing so would actually create some room in project proformas where the government can then be, as we are in Toronto, more aggressive in environmental standards for new buildings. But right now you kind of can't do both. And then I also think there's an opportunity for the government to be much more laser focused on providing per door subsidies for affordable housing. How much was that announcement for the EV Honda battery plant? 15, what was it? It was a lot. It was, so we're subsidizing Honda to come here and build EVs. Do you know how much affordable housing you could build with that money? We could have a 10 years worth of affordable housing supply with that money. So the government is subsidizing things. Let's subsidize building homes that are affordable and attainable for key workers and for vulnerable populations. It's actually the only way it's ever been done. In the 70s, when we built a significant amount of affordable housing, it was because we had really strong government programs at the federal level that enabled it. It's only ever been done that way in the past.
And you were recently involved in the creation of the National Blueprint for More and Better Housing, which when I read that document, and it actually seemed, it was optimistic to me in answer to the question of can you achieve sustainability targets and housing targets at the same time? And I think densification was a big part of that message as well. Is that fair, or?
Well, yeah, there's 4 key pillars to the plan, and the plan that Jesse's referring to is a national task force that was made up of folks from across the political spectrum. There were 15 members on the task force. I was very honored to be asked to be on it. We made a series of policy recommendations to all 3 levels of government, which is what's really unique. This is what the feds ought to consider doing. This is what the provinces should do. This is what municipalities should be doing. And that fed into the new housing strategy that the federal government was creating, and that was launched a couple of weeks ago. But the very first pillar of 4 pillars focused on where we build is fundamental to both sustainability and affordability, because the cost per home to build housing where we don't have existing infrastructure, so on a greenfield, is much higher than infill housing. So if we want to build quickly, we want to build in a way that is much less costly and is more sustainable, we need to focus on infill sites.
Thank you. I'm checking the time, and I have just one question left, I think. So I have to pick from a large number, but I guess bringing us back to the spirit of collaboration, and I think your message of hope and delivering on the promise, maybe you could leave us with just one, if you can, inspiring thought about how you might have seen in your life or your work municipalities collaborate on something like the environment or climate, or a city collaborating with a community group like we're trying to do here with BACC. It'd be nice to hear of another example as we move forward.
I actually have lots of examples, but the first one that popped into my mind, because in some ways it's so incredibly shocking. When I started as chief planner, I started an initiative called Toronto Talks Transportation. And what we did was we created a collaboration that was between Civic Action, which is both the private and the public sector leaders that work on various different initiatives. The Board of Trade came to the table for this. We had all kinds of different organizations that came together to really advocate for the importance of a transformative investment in public transit, a transformative investment. And the Board of Trade did this amazing report on the impact on productivity of not having access to excellent public transportation. We had other organizations that did reports on the impact to low-income communities and to newcomers coming to the community and how difficult it was accessing education and jobs due to a lack of access to transportation. Then we had city planning that did the whole land use analysis piece. And we did this over the course of several years. And some of you might remember it. We cheekily called the campaign Feeling Congested. And we worked with cycling advocates. We tried to link together everyone and anyone who would come to the table around the importance of public transit being the foundation of how we change the city and how we change the future. And we didn't really care what lens people were bringing to it. You want to talk about this from an equity perspective? Fantastic. You want to talk about public transit from a sustainability perspective? Fantastic. You want to talk about it from the perspective of economic development? Fantastic. And we aligned all of these interests. We had 8 kind of different interest groups, if you will: equity, economic development, social prosperity. We linked them all together. And the amazing thing that happened was we were able to get this transit network plan passed at council that identified and prioritized all of our key projects. And before that, in Toronto, there was always this crazy debate about LRT versus subway. And every project got canceled because it was you're either an LRT person or you're a subway person. And what we tried to do in that exercise was elevate the conversation to being about an everywhere to everywhere transit system and transit network to get us out of the rut of that old debate. And we were successful. And we got councillors who were LRT councillors to support the downtown relief line, which has now become the Ontario line. We were able to kind of get people out of their corners and around the same table. And as a result, that plan got approved. And when it got approved, the TTC chair, and I had a few of them, so I won't name who this was, but the TTC chair called me into his office and he said, "This is irresponsible. This is billions of dollars of investment and there's no money for any of it." And I was like, "Yeah, but remember the economic action plan under Harper? Do you know what got funded? Shovel-ready projects. So we can sit back and say we have no money, or we can get transit shovel ready. That's what we can do." So we did all of this planning for billions of dollars of transit without any money. We lobbied a little bit at the federal level, but an interesting and quite frankly amazing thing happened. And I apologize because this is a little bit painful, because at the same time that the LRT project in Hamilton was canceled, we ended up getting our funding for our Ontario line. And
painful.
it is painful, I know. So I'm sorry about that. And it was painful to me when it was canceled as well. And well, it was a delay, it turned out in the end. But the amazing thing is that now I can sit here 7 years later, and that plan is fully funded mostly by 2 levels of government, not 3, not by the municipality, mostly by the provincial government and by the federal government. And you know what? It was kind of a 10-year plan to get us there. And we got there. And the people who didn't believe, like the TTC chair, he didn't believe. He rapped me on the knuckles and he was like, "Oh, there's no way we're going to get this. We're getting people all excited and it'll never get built." The shovels are in the ground right now. That's why there's so much transportation chaos in downtown Toronto right now, because the whole downtown is under construction and most of it is transit. We're putting in new subway stops. We're putting in new subway lines. We're building new LRT, and it is creating, a generation's worth of chaos. But it's part of a big, big plan and a big vision. And it started with that interagency collaboration where we brought everyone together around a shared vision of a truly world-class transit system. And, everything getting built out in the fullness of time, it's going to take a while, but we're well on our way right now to making that happen. And so, I would say the biggest risk I see in mid-sized cities and regions is that they're not dreaming big enough. That they're kind of like, well, we might be able to get this. No, go for this. What's the big vision? What's the big aspiration that you need in order to truly create a livable, sustainable region where people do not even think about owning a car because you simply do not need to own a car. It's just not necessary. And it's a bit of a bummer to have to own one. And I say that as someone who has spent, I'm now with the change in the weather, I'm cycling every day to work. And I have to tell you, I feel like I'm cheating every day on my way to work. I'm like, I'm going through a ride through the city on my bike. There's lots of cars that are just like backed up, congestion everywhere. And I feel like I'm cheating. My quality of life in doing so is very high.
Well, thank you. That is definitely an inspiring note to end our discussion and encourage us to keep thinking big, setting our vision for 2050 together, I think, as a group. So thank you very much, Jennifer. It's been such a pleasure to have you. Thank you.
Wow. Thanks very much. Wow, that was excellent. And Jennifer, it's always a pleasure to have you back in Hamilton. We know that you, or at least I've heard you're going to be cutting back on your public speaking. And that's unfortunate in a way. I understand why, but you bring such passion to the work you do and help open our eyes to what the possibilities are. So thank you for that. Well, we're at the end of our program for today. It's truly been an inspiring night. We've heard from our mayors about the municipal effort to combat climate change, as well as the commitment to work collaboratively across municipal boundaries. We've heard from Jesse, our BACC manager, about how effective collective impact initiatives can be had. And Jesse, I think the last subject that you talked over with Jennifer about the building on the transit side fits perfectly into one of our implementation teams. So it's a great idea, and I think we can actually use that. We've also heard from Jennifer about other tangible steps our communities might take on the road to net zero. And you know what? There's an opportunity for you to get involved as well if you want. If you're feeling inspired and want to take action, there are a number of things that you can do. With respect to BACC, you can give us feedback about our strategic direction. It's available online, priorities and work plans. You can use this QR code to access the public survey to give us feedback on our work. We'll circulate the link to everyone after the event as well. We'll be reopening old and forming new implementation teams in the coming months to focus on emission reductions in areas of transportation, buildings, industry, and the need for adequate energy resources. These are working groups of local residents and organizations with lived or technical experience to help advance our emissions reduction priorities. And if you have interest or expertise in one of those areas, please feel free to reach out to us and join us in the work against climate. Our BACC members, please check out the work of our member organizations. Their banners are up around the room. They'll be here after the event if you want to check them out and chat with them about the work they're doing and the work they're doing with BACC. And with the cities, check out the cities, each of the cities' climate action pages for each of the cities to learn more about what's happening in your city. And finally, we have a number of people to thank who have made tonight's event a success. Thank you to Mayor Meed Ward and Mayor Horwath for attending and speaking at tonight's event. Very much appreciated. Thank you to our sponsor, presenting sponsor, Alina. Thank you to our major sponsor, Hamilton Environmental Association. And thank you to our forum supporters, Friendlier, Hamilton Community Enterprises, Landwise, and the Realtors Association of Hamilton and Burlington. And thank you as well tonight to our ASL interpreters and staff at the Royal Botanical Gardens and our volunteers and event organizers. Thank you to our BACC Forum Steering Committee, to Regina Foisey and Bill Steinberg at Mohawk College for your support. Mohawk's been an excellent partner for us and have done great work for us. Thank you to our small but mighty staff team at BACC, two incredible women, Julia McLeod and Jessie Elders. And finally, to everyone in the audience, both in person and those watching live stream and on broadcast, Thank you for attending and supporting climate action. That concludes our program. We invite you to stay a little while longer, connect with each other, ask questions, stay and have a drink with us if you want. And we wish everyone a good night. Thank you.